Hello, welcome to 30 Minutes. I'm Rick Anthony. Well, the off-year election is over. Most of the signs have been taken down from the lawns and the byways. And of course, it's time to start predicting the outcome of the midterm elections, but we'll leave that for another show. Today, we're visiting with Jake Abel, who is the Radnor Township Commissioner for the 6th Ward, who has won re-election to that seat in a hotly contested election. Jake, it's good to be with you.
Thanks for having me back.
Thank you. It's nice to have you back.
Glad to be here.
Okay. Jake, you went up against the odds. You were sometimes viciously attacked by your opponent's handlers with fallacious information that you were against the puppies and first responders and all the other good things in life. And you went up against a pretty daunting voter registration handicap. A lot of people are wondering why you did it and how you did it.
Well, let's take this from the why. And you know, we heard this from early on. You know, back in December, January, when we were on the fence, figuring out whether we wanted to run for re-election or not. There were a lot of people who, you know, I respect their counsel who advised not to because there's nothing to gain from it. Mm-hmm. There's a lot to lose from it, but you know, I don't think in those terms. And when we sat down, and again, you know, over the last 4 years,
we is your wife,
my wife, yeah,
okay.
and family.
Yeah.
You know, the boys have a say in this too, but you know, mainly my wife. But when we sat down and started to think about it, and you look at the last 4 years, what I've asked the neighbors to do and the vision we've laid out and the ability to bring people together mm-hmm. to achieve these shared goals. You know, some of these items weren't done. The projects are still out there. And so when you ask neighbors to come forward and to support, you know, I felt like we had an obligation to at least give it a try and see these projects through, in addition to some other projects that we have that we've talked about. So that's the why. You know, the neighbors have always been there for me, mm-hmm. And so I thought it was our obligation to do this again and continue this you know, continue along this path that we've right. created. The how, we still, you know, that's something that we're going to look at over the next couple of weeks. You know, Brent Doan, who ran my campaign, and I will sit down, and you know, first of all, he ran this amazing campaign. You know, I gave him some ideas. He put this blueprint together, and it was, you know, it was flawless. It was better than 4 years ago, and I don't know that we could have run it any better. But we're going to take a look. What went right? What are some of the things that we thought we could do better? And hopefully then we'll be able to see, you know, how we got to Election Day.
Well, I think what was particularly significant is you had a lot of crossovers.
Yeah, and we thought so.
And that was the only way you were going to win
this. The only way you can win in as a Republican, running as a Republican in Ward 6 is to be able to get crossovers and high turnout. You know, we're looking at close to a 400 voter registration deficit, Republican, Democrat, but mm-hmm. then there's 600 independents or other registrations. Mm-hmm. And so we were targeting the independent, the others, and registered Democrats. And our message isn't partisan. Our message is, you know, yes. let's work together. We're better united than we are divided. And you know, look at the last 4 years. You know, go around the ward, and you're going to see more projects in Ward 6 than you probably will in any other area of the township. And that's because people believed in the message, they saw the vision, and they came together. And you know, it's easy to say no to me on the dais. It's hard to say no to 30, 40 residents who show up consistently and say this is important for our community. So and just talking about the crossover. And here's some of the data that we see that we're really proud of in the first precinct, which is west, you know, the farthest point of West Wayne, Morris, Clover, South Devon, Morningside, and Arbordale. Those streets, we've never won in that area. You know, we've always kept it close, but we're always 30, 40, 50 votes. Mm-hmm. You know, we're always trailing by that number. We had close to 500 votes in the first precinct, which shows and demonstrates that when you have a message that people believe in and you're bringing people together, they will come out and support. And that's what we saw.
Certainly not to take anything away from your campaign and the fact that you ran on local issues and won on local issues, but to what extent do you think there was some momentum that caused some of the surprises on a national level? People paying more attention, people finally saying enough. Was there any of that? Did you detect any of that attitude, spirit in the turnout?
Yeah, and you heard that, but I always, as I told people, local elections are won at the doorstep, not at the mailbox.
Right.
So, and let me first say, my opponent, I congratulate her on stepping forward. Avery, she ran a good campaign.
And I know that she reached out to you election night and to congratulate you and to offer her support. That's a class act.
It is, and I didn't have that 4 years ago. I was, I was very happy that she reached out, and we had a nice conversation. And there were issues that she brought forward that I also believe in, and so I offered and asked her to stay involved, and hopefully we can work together. And the more people that are behind these issues, the better off we are. But to get to your question, I did see and I did hear some of those national issues coming into the local election, and I think that brought some people out. But for the most part, again, when you run a campaign in 9 months, knocking on over 2,000 doors, people want that direct communication. They're putting a face with the name, and so when they see the signs going around the township, and we had probably close to 85 signs on people's lawns, nine banners. You weren't going a block or two without seeing our message. We are one Radnor, but they knew that was genuine because we had a conversation. We had that 3 minutes at their doorstep where I was able to lay out the vision, talk about our successes and what we can do the next 4 years.
Speaking of the next 4 years and something more immediate, what came out of last Monday's commissioners meeting that helps to set your agenda for the next 4 years? Well, there were some pretty important issues, not the least of which is the budget.
Yeah, so Monday's meeting was primarily focused on the budget, and one thing that I was very happy to see and vote in favor of was we had bipartisan support not to raise the millage rate this year. So we are going to pass a budget, hopefully that I will be able to approve and cast. I haven't voted in favor of a budget in 4 years. Hopefully this will be the first one that won't raise taxes on the residents, and that's important to me. I think, especially in a year of COVID and the pandemic, we should be looking at if we have to, if there are expenditures, we should be looking at areas we can cut and be able to fit everything in without raising taxes. So that was important. Second thing, we're still making headway on these 501c3s. It's a discussion I've been raising for 4 years now. First and foremost, we shouldn't be funding 501c3s that don't reside in the township.
Those are charitable organizations.
Charitable organizations. I understand that they may support Radnor residents, but there are a number of organizations outside of Radnor Township that support Radnor residents. So where do we draw the line? And so to me, it's got to be, it's very black and white. It's a cut. So 4 years ago, we had one organization that was at 50,000. We've brought them down, and my vote was for complete cut, but I think the consensus was we cut it down to 10,000, and we're moving in the right direction in my mind. We've got some other organizations, namely the Historical Society, and we've got the Wayne Arts Center. Both do a great, they offer a great service to Radnor residents. The Arts Center, world renowned. I was down in Florida, and people were coming up to me talking about the Wayne Arts Center because they heard I was from Wayne. But again, we've got a lot of tough decisions to make, and there's limited resources that we have, and revenue is not coming in as it has in previous years. So we have to make a decision, and my decision is we've got to start drawing down our contributions to the 501c3s, and hopefully they can rely on donations from outside sources.
But how will those savings be reallocated?
Well, I don't know that you need to. I don't know that you need to reallocate.
We always need more police protection. Well, for example.
Well, Look, that's a different issue. So first of all, if we're not spending on certain
Yes.
line items,
Right.
that doesn't mean we have to automatically go and spend. Why
I
not
agree.
save? And then when we have a project that we consider of high importance or
Right.
a necessity, then we have funds to draw on.
Yes.
So I mean that's the first thing. I don't think we always need to, if there's money in a pot, it doesn't always need to be spent.
Yeah.
It could be saved for future projects. Two, I'm not in favor of always saying there's a problem, let's hire additional resources. I'd rather have less butts and seats and more projects in our streets.
Mm-hmm.
That might be my new motto for the next 4 years.
Say it again.
Less butts and seats,
All right.
more projects in our streets. So I'd rather see that funding go toward park improvements, road resurfacing, which is
Yes.
an issue
Oh,
near
yes,
and dear.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So people want to see their tax dollars going to work,
Yeah.
and I think that's important. Now, when we talk about police, there was a study done years ago that said our police force should be at 45. That's the ideal number. We're at that number. We have 45 police officers.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're meeting our obligations there to the township.
Well, I don't know. I don't know when the study was done, and circumstances change. There's more crime on the streets today, I'm sure, than there was when that study was done.
Could be, but what's to say an additional police officer would solve the crime?
Yeah, and I don't want to dedicate the big part of the show to that, but as you and I have discussed before, there is still a need for more technology, right, to make residents safe and secure. Cameras,
Yep.
where we have one, I think, in the township.
Sure.
Cameras, other technology that could be used as auxiliary to the people on the streets, just to get more out of the investment in security, safety and security.
Yeah, and as you know, I've proposed additional cameras within the township. I proposed one at the corner of Morris Road and Sugartown, where we've had 3 major incidents in the last 2.5 years.
Yeah.
That was voted down by the board. I think you're right. So, is the answer additional police officers, or is it looking at
Fair enough.
looking at it comprehensively and supporting the police officers with other technologies? And I think that's one, important, and two, probably more cost effective.
Yeah.
And the police, when they came with their budget, they didn't say that additional police officers on the street was the priority.
Mm-hmm.
Their number one priority was to have an emergency management officer. So that would take. So we would take a police officer, put him in this emergency management role,
Right.
and then backfill. So we would still have 45 police officers on the streets.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't even hear from the police that was the priority.
I just said we're not going to dedicate a big chunk of it, but I have a follow-up question. To what extent do the various municipalities back one another up, that is the police? When Radnor has a need for more than 45, do they reach to Haverford and Tredyffrin and some of the other townships for help?
That's a good question that I don't have an answer to, but what I can say is, we had an incident within the last week on Abrams Lane, so that's right on that's within Radnor Township.
Right.
But there was a suspect who went on foot, and so the report I've received was we did have support from Havertown Police Department. So I think
Yeah.
when it's
makes
called
sense.
upon, we have support, and it's the same way with the fire company.
Yeah.
When we have a fire company, Radnor supporting Berwyn, and Berwyn supports
It
Radnor.
just makes sense to look at those resources on a regional basis rather than just a local basis.
Sure.
Which I hope is what we're doing. In your last newsletter, you mentioned an item that I don't recall ever hearing you mention before. I'm going to read it. There needs to be a plan to modernize our workforce, and the answer to every challenge cannot be to hire more staff, as you just said. We do not need a bloated township. You cited the police department, but are there other departments where we should do some really close analysis of existing resources and how they can be deployed more effectively, more productively?
Yeah, and I think in my newsletter, I don't know that I referenced the police. I think
No, you
we
didn't.
talked about the
No,
police
you
here.
didn't. No. We were just talking
Yeah,
about.
I'll give you an example. So residents are concerned about the trees within Radnor Township. We have a I'm told we have a healthy canopy. I mean, that's more for and that's coming from tree experts. But the safety of trees, are they the state of decline? We probably do have to do a better job of understanding the health of our trees, especially in our parks. So there's talks about hiring all these new staff, having a tree crew. Well, that comes with insurance, equipment, specialized resources. So right there, we're talking about a big expenditure. That's a big commitment.
Yes.
So my plan that I laid out a couple weeks ago was we have like, and this is just an example, we have a public works crew. When they pick up trash, we have 3 to 4 men or women on a truck. Easttown, which is directly across from where I live, comes down Valley Forge, and sometimes I grab my trash, sometimes they don't. They have one person on a truck because they have the front loader that picks up the trash and puts it right into the truck. So I think this is, and when I say modernize, this is probably a 10-year process.
Yeah.
But first look at the equipment. What equipment's out there that we could utilize and leverage that draws down on our manpower within trucks?
Yes.
And then we know parks is a priority. We start pushing more of our manpower, our billets, into the parks. And then as people retire or as they want to become more specialized, maybe we use some of those billets to build out a tree crew. And that's where you start, it's not an upfront cost, but it's something that we can plan over a 7 to 10 year process and slowly fill in. So my first reaction when we have a problem isn't to say, let's go hire 10 people. It's to look at holistically what we have now. Do we think that's going to be the same in 10 years? And work with folks like CARFAC or the Shade Tree Committee and start to put that plan in place.
I've got to ask you about microcells. What's the latest? Has the board issued regs or ordinance or whatever?
Yep. So we've passed the new ordinance that looks at small wireless facilities. It lays out what the township authorities are, what the utility company authorities are, and it's very clear to neighbors now, what's allowed in their neighborhood and what's not. So
wait, you say it's clear. This hasn't been communicated, has it?
Well, it's been communicated in the sense that we've had 2 board meetings dedicated to having a discussion.
Okay.
It's to me, and again, let's preface this. I'm not an advocate. I'm not an opponent of microcells. I'm working with neighborhoods.
There's been a lot of misinformation about it.
There has, and I'm working with neighborhoods to help them understand the process. So my suggestion and my advice to neighborhoods is if you have poor cell communication, you should probably be reaching out, 1, to your neighborhood association, 2, to a utility company such as Crown Castle, and just bringing them in to have a discussion on what the process is so everybody is on the same page. What I don't think people understand is these carriers, they have a mandate to have so many microcells up within the next 7 to 10 years. People understand that there's dead spots within Radnor Township, so it makes sense that they would start looking at Radnor as a place to put up microcells, but people need to be ready for it.
But rather than wait, doesn't it make sense for the township to be more proactive in inviting and encouraging the carriers to come in? The Verizons, the AT&Ts, et cetera.
Yeah, I don't think we need to invite the utility companies in. They're here. They know.
Yeah, but they're not spending money. They're not making an investment in infrastructure.
Well, that's a business decision on the carrier end. They know the issues. They know the areas. It's not the township's responsibility. It's more the neighbor's responsibility. So if you're not having, it's not my obligation to make sure you have 4 bars in your neighborhood. But if the association thinks that is of importance, they should be reaching out and they should be having that conversation. And I'm there, and I think the township is there to facilitate that and just help that conversation happen. And then neighbors can decide, is this something that we actually want in our neighborhood?
Fair enough. Jake, it's been tough over the past 4 years, being one of only 2 Republicans on the board. And now you will be 1. Republican on
Right.
the board. I'm sure you've thought about it. You have been successful in the past in trying to create some coalitions among the other commissioners on some important issues. Nonetheless, I would think it's going to be even more difficult this time. How do you approach it, and how do you reach out and try to establish good relationships with your colleagues? Forget about party differences.
Right.
Your colleagues on the board.
Yeah, I think for the most part, I've had good relationships with colleagues on the board. I mean, there's some that, you know, every time I propose something, you know, it's always a direct counter or try to derail, and that people see through that and they understand what it is. What it is. But look at the last 4 years. As you said, I was one of two, and for a couple of years there was a third, but always in the minority. But when you're talking, again, not talking partisan issues, but talking what you believe is best for the community, and even though people have opposed it, you know, we've seen them come around. So let's take trees, for example. You know, from the beginning, I opposed removing trees unnecessarily or under emergency order in our parks, especially in like take West Wayne Preserve, where we took down 20 trees that some of them were in a wetlands where people don't even visit. They were of no risk to anybody. It was just a huge expenditure that we didn't need to do. I opposed the removal of emergency trees in Enki Park because one fell over. I mean, trees, you know, they're prone to fall, but that doesn't mean we just remove them and just take large trees out, because we'll never see that height or that canopy again in our lifetime. But now, 4 years later, everybody's talking about trees. So the board has come around to it. So I mean, that's what I'll continue to do. I'll continue to speak about my values, regardless of whether I'm 1, 2, or 5, you know, on the board. And you know, I think the more I talk about it,
but you may have to fight to be heard.
No, I don't believe so. I mean, again, we've built this network over the last 4+ years now within the ward, and I've got people from outside the ward coming to me saying, you know, you've been very effective taking down nuisance wires. Can you help us?
Yes.
So people understand, you know, when you're fighting for the right thing and not for partisan issues, the word spreads, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build this and show people that we have the community in mind, and we're trying. You know, at the end of the day, you know, we all live here. We're all fortunate. We all came to Radnor for the same reason, and when you see improvement, everybody wants to see it.
Looking ahead, though, beyond the 6th Ward, what advice, counsel, can you give others who may aspire to public office, Republicans? How can they win? How can the Republican Party regain what it has lost over the past few years? And that obviously is the confidence of the electorate. Yeah,
and it's not just Republicans. You know, I've talked with friends who have family members who have run with a different party outside of Radnor Township. I've talked with candidates from not just within Radnor but elsewhere, and I give everybody the same advice: know your neighbors. You don't know your neighbors by sending them a mailer. A mailer is as good. A mailer is as effective as long as your driveway is. So when you get your mail, you're reading whatever it is, and most times you're ripping up and throwing away a piece of literature. But when you get into the house, so more effective is going to your neighbors, understanding what their problems, what their challenges, what their concerns are, and asking, how can I help you? And that's, you know, in a local community, a local government, that's the only way to continue to improve and understand where your community is.
But in your case, and even your opponent these days, it was supported by social media. Your face-to-face was supported by social media and getting your message out, reinforcing your message.
Yeah, but it's social media, and I was trying to use this campaign as kind of a metric. Social media, you're only hitting a small number of people. I think it's effective in that it helps and reinforces the message that you're trying to get out there. But again, I'm convinced the only way to really impact and touch every person is showing up at the end of somebody's driveway, spending that 5 minutes at the grocery store in the checkout line, and, having a conversation, and then, ringing a doorbell. As hard as it is, people feel uncomfortable about it. Ring a doorbell, and just, have that 3-minute conversation, and it goes a long way.
How can, given the groundswell we've seen locally and across the country, more people paying closer attention to what's going on, and that's good. But how do you sustain that? How do you get people to come out to commissioners' meetings? I have to say I don't do it as often perhaps as I should. They are long, most of them. They are tedious, many of them. They are frustrating, many of them, because you see what's going on up there and you wonder, what's going on? These people know what they're doing sometimes? Right. Obviously bright people, but there's always politics involved, there's different agendas and so on. And you sit back and you say, I don't have any control over that, so what's the point? So how do you get people engaged and to stay engaged, not just in election time, but stay engaged in being aware of and fighting for what's best for their community?
So I've said from day one, back in 2017, our community works best when neighbors are informed and engaged. I still believe that today. And I'll just give you an example. This election, I spent a lot of time on Highland Avenue, Maplewood, West Wayne, talking about what we've done over the last 4 years with the First Baptist Cemetery, resurfacing Highland Avenue, working to get improvements to Odorisio Park. Every Tuesday I'm on Highland Avenue talking with the neighbors there. I saw more neighbors show up at the township building on election day from Highland Avenue than I have in 4 years, because they know I'm invested in them, so they've come back and supported me. So I know they're engaged, and now it's on me to show them it wasn't just about an election. I've been there for 4 years. I will continue to be there for them. And showing up at a board meeting's tough. It's a Monday night. It's a long meeting. You don't know when you're going to be there. You have kids. You have a job. So I would love for them to show up at a board meeting. I'd rather them to show up at a town hall meeting, and I'll start those again. Hopefully by the end of the, maybe at the end of November, but definitely by the end of the year. We're going to start doing town hall meetings. That's where I need them to be engaged, so we can start putting plans together, and then get 10 or 15 of them out to board meetings. That's the impact.
Jake, I'm glad for the opportunity to talk with you in your position as commissioner now and in the future.
For another 4 years.
That's right. So we'll be visiting again, I'm sure. Until next time, this is 30 Minutes. I've been visiting today with Jake Abel, who is the commissioner of the 6th Ward in Radnor Township. Until next time, take very good care of yourselves.